It happened in November 2021, in the quiet town of Lake Pine, North Carolina. The streets were narrow and still, lined with bare trees and quiet storefronts. At the center of town was a small pond, surrounded by a wooden fence and old park benches. Just beyond that, near an aging bakery with fogged-up windows and fading paint, stood a weathered bus stop. That was where the puppy came each evening, right around 5 o'clock. He was small and scruffy, with wiry fur that curled behind his ears and eyes that held more weight than a creature his age should carry. His steps were careful but practiced, like someone following a remembered path. He didn't bark. He didn't chase cars. He didn't even beg. Instead, he made his way to the same spot, just to the right of the bench, where the concrete dipped slightly and curled up tightly, nose tucked beneath his tail, eyes fixed on the road. People noticed, at first with curiosity, then concern. He looked clean enough to have belonged to someone, though there was no collar, no tag. Perhaps he had slipped away from home, they thought. But when no one came looking and the days passed, the town began to understand. He wasn't lost. He was waiting. At first, some tried to coax him into their homes, but he never followed. He would simply watch them with polite distance and then return to his spot. A few neighbors began leaving food. Someone brought a silver bowl for water. A teenager left an old plaid blanket, folded into a square and laid beneath the bench. The puppy accepted these things without fuss, but without affection. He didn't wag his tail or lick hands. He simply endured the kindness and stayed, as if it were part of the routine now. The routine had become ritual. Every evening he arrived. Every night he remained until long after the buses had stopped. And then, sometime past midnight, he would vanish into the shadows again, only to return the next day with the same quiet determination. No one knew his name. No one knew where he came from. But there were whispers. A child swore they saw someone leave a box by the bench that summer. A man remembered a car pulling away quickly one afternoon with a flash of brown fur in the rear view. But these were guesses, and none changed the fact that the puppy waited. He wasn't waiting for food or shelter or warmth. He was waiting for something he believed he had lost, but hadn't let go of. Someone. Someone who left him here, once, with or without intention. And in his heart, he still believed they would return. He didn't know the days were growing colder or that winter was closing in. He didn't count sunsets or hours. He only knew the feeling of the bus stop, the way the pavement cooled beneath his paws, and the scent of asphalt and exhaust and memory. He watched the road as though it could answer something. And when it didn't, he simply curled tighter and waited again. The first snow came suddenly in the last days of November. It wasn't in the forecast. The morning had started grey, with a sharp wind and heavy clouds. But by late afternoon, the flakes had begun to fall, slow at first, then steady. The streets of Lake Pine turned pale and quiet. Footprints disappeared within minutes. The town seemed to exhale and pull its coat tighter. At 4:50 p.m., the puppy arrived at the bus stop. He came as he always did, slipping out of whatever narrow space he called shelter and trotting toward the familiar bench. But this time, the concrete was different. It bit through his paws with its cold. When he curled up, the sting crept into his bones, dull and constant. He stood again, paced in a tight circle, then moved to the corner where a brick wall offered a bit of shelter. But after a minute, he returned to the same place beside the bench. That was the spot. That was where it happened. And that was where he had to be. The plaid blanket was still there, though it was soaked and half covered in snow. He didn't shake it off. He didn't dig. He simply lowered himself onto it, as if the ritual couldn't be broken by weather. Flakes settled on his fur. His ears twitched now and then. Each time a car passed, he lifted his head just slightly, watching, waiting. Then he lowered it again. The snow clung to his back, forming little ridges along his spine. A school bus rolled past. His eyes followed it. A sedan pulled to the stoplight and idled. The driver glanced at him. Then the light changed, and the car moved on. Nothing else did. He didn't whimper. He didn't bark or howl. He didn't try to chase the warmth he lacked. He just remained, like a monument to some forgotten promise, as if his waiting was not just habit, but purpose, as if leaving that place meant betraying something. That was the day Maddie Rose saw him for the first time. She had just finished grocery shopping and was walking home, bags in hand, her coat dusted with snow. She might have missed him entirely, if not for the movement. A small shift of ears, a twitch of fur against white. She stopped, squinted through the snowfall, and then stepped closer. The puppy didn't run. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't approach. But he didn't retreat either. When she crouched beside him, he shifted slightly, enough to say he saw her, but not enough to break the space between them. His eyes were tired. Not walked or panicked, just old in the way grief makes things older. Maddie stayed only a moment. Her knees ached from crouching. Her hands burned from cold. But something rooted her there in the hush of falling snow, with this little life curled beside a bus stop, like it had nowhere else left to be. She didn't say anything. She didn't reach out. But later, when she got home and set the groceries down, she realized the image had stayed with her. A silent imprint, like something unspoken that still manages to echo. And so the puppy waited, as snow covered the town and light faded behind the clouds. He didn't know he had been seen. He only knew the bench, the road, the place where he had last known love. And until someone returned for him, he would return for them. The next day, Maddie returned to the bus stop. She came just before dusk, carrying a small container of warm broth and a few pieces of torn bread wrapped in a napkin. The snow from the previous evening had begun to melt, leaving wet patches on the sidewalk and a chill in the air that crept through gloves and coats alike. The puppy was already there, curled up beside the same bench, his fur matted with bits of half-melted ice. She placed the food down a few feet away and backed off. She didn't speak, didn't call, didn't crouch. She simply waited across the sidewalk, standing under the awning of the bakery, her hands deep in her pockets. The puppy didn't move at first. He kept his head low, eyes flicking toward her, and then back to the container. When she finally walked away, slowly, without turning, he got up. His legs trembled slightly from cold or stiffness or something older. He sniffed. Then he ate, quietly, cautiously, as if unsure the meal was meant for him. Maddie came the next evening, and the next. Within a week, he began to sit up when she approached. He didn't come forward, but he watched her arrival as if it were a part of the routine he already knew. 2 weeks later, he allowed her to sit closer, not beside him, not yet, but within reach. When she gently extended her hand and brushed the edge of his ear, He flinched only once. Then he stayed still. That moment lingered longer in her than she expected. The softness of his fur, the sharpness of his bones beneath it. No one knew where the puppy had come from. Maddie asked around, starting with the bakery. The owner hadn't seen anything unusual. She called the nearby shelter, but no one had reported a missing pup matching his description. He had no collar, no microchip, no scars that pointed to a past life, only the strange solemnity of a dog who waited for something that never came. She posted a photo on a local community group, just his silhouette at sunset, curled on the bench's edge. Dozens of comments came in. People offered food, blankets, help, but no one recognized him. No one claimed him. Only one child, an 11-year-old boy named Carter, stopped her one afternoon outside the grocery store. He pointed at the photo on her phone and said he thought he saw someone drop a box near the bus stop back in the summer. A cardboard box, taped and ragged. He remembered because it was hot that day, and the box looked like it didn't belong there. A car had driven off. Fast. He hadn't thought much of it. That had been months ago, and the puppy had stayed. Not because he couldn't leave, but because he didn't know he was supposed to. To him, that bench was still a place of origin, of beginning, the last known point on a map that had since vanished. Maddie stood outside her classroom that night, holding the leash she hadn't yet tried to use. She watched the lights flicker on inside the bakery across the street. The puppy was curled up again, breathing slowly, as if each breath still held the shape of an arrival that had never happened. And in her heart, a question began to grow. Not just who left him, but who would he become if someone stayed? The morning was colder than usual, with frost lining the corners of windows and a pale hush resting over Lake Pine. Maddie left her house earlier than normal. The streets were nearly empty, and the bakery lights hadn't yet flickered on. She parked her car across from the bus stop and crossed the street with deliberate steps. In her arms, she carried a clean fleece blanket and a shallow bowl filled with warm pieces of beef and rice. She didn't speak. She didn't call. She spread the blanket neatly on the bench's edge, close enough to shield from the wind, but far enough not to seem forced. She placed the bowl beside it, the aroma curling into the air. Then she sat. Not close, not far, just enough to share space without pressure. Her breath clouded in the morning chill. The minutes passed. Then came the sound of small paws brushing against concrete. The pup emerged from the alley, as he had every morning. His fur was dusted with bits of leaves, and his ears twitched at every sound. But his eyes, those cautious, ancient eyes, were steady. He paused at the corner, watching her. Then he moved forward. Not in a rush, not out of excitement, but because the pattern had formed. This was the hour. This was the place. And she was part of it now. He approached the blanket, but didn't lie on it. Instead, he circled once and settled just to the side, his flank brushing the edge, as if unwilling to take what hadn't fully been offered. He didn't touch the food. He simply rested his head on his paws and kept his gaze on the empty road. Maddie didn't try to pet him. She didn't even turn her head. She sat in silence for a long time. Then slowly, gently, she stood. Her boots made no sound on the frozen sidewalk. She took one step back, then another. She didn't look away. The pup raised his head. For the first time, he moved not because of routine, not because of food, but because she moved. He rose, ears back, and padded toward her, not quickly, not playfully, but purposefully. His body held no fear, only question, the kind of question asked without words. Is it okay if I follow now? He reached the curb where her car was parked and stopped beside the door. He sniffed the air, then the tires, then the door itself. One paw lifted, hovered, and rested against the frame. Not a scratch, not a plea, just the softest suggestion of maybe. Maddie opened the door, slowly, deliberately. The puppy didn't jump. He didn't bolt or tremble. He stepped back at first, then inched forward, smelled the seat, touched the floor mat with his nose, sat, stood again, turned once, and without a sound, climbed in. She didn't close the door right away. He sat on the seat, hunched low, staring at the dashboard like it was a new kind of landscape. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't whimper. He just existed there, suspended between the road he knew and the one he didn't. When Maddie finally closed the door and circled to the driver's seat, she glanced over at him. He was still, his gaze steady, his body unmoving. This was not a moment of triumph. There was no joy yet, no trust. But it was something else. It was surrender, not to a person, but to the idea that maybe waiting didn't mean staying in one place forever. That maybe sometimes you could carry your waiting with you, and that someone might sit with you in it. The house was warm, but the puppy didn't treat it as home. Not yet. He didn't explore, didn't sniff every corner like most dogs would. He kept close to the door. At night, he curled on the rug near it, facing the threshold, as if still listening for footsteps outside. His meals were eaten slowly, one piece at a time, as if chewing meant forgetting. He didn't chase toys, didn't bark, didn't ask for walks. His eyes often drifted toward the front window. Every evening, around the same hour he used to appear at the bus stop, he would sit there, watching the shadows stretch across the road. Sometimes his ears would twitch at the sound of a distant car, a passing voice, the rustle of wind in the trees. But his body remained still. Maddie gave him space. She didn't coax him or shower him with treats. She let the silence settle between them like a blanket. She placed a bowl of water next to his mat every evening. She sat nearby and read aloud. Not children's stories, but calm, rhythmic novels with soft words. She let her voice be present, nothing more. Not demanding, not pulling, just there. Days became weeks. She learned his habits. He liked the edge of the rug, not the center. He preferred chicken to beef. Rain made him nervous, and he would pace in circles until it stopped. He never jumped on furniture, never barked at the door. He existed like a shadow, gentle, patient, waiting. Then one day in late December, as Maddie came in from the cold with her scarf half unwrapped, he stood up before she reached the coat rack. Just stood. His tail gave a single, slow wag. Not the kind that speaks of joy or excitement, but one of recognition, of seeing someone and knowing them. That night, for the first time, he fell asleep beside the fireplace instead of the door. She named him Tim that evening, quietly, while pouring his dinner into the bowl. A name without too much weight, a name like a soft echo. Something short and warm that wouldn't frighten the quiet he carried with him. He looked up when she said it, didn't react right away. But the next time she said it, he came to her, slowly, as if walking through water, as if learning what it meant to belong not to a place, but to a presence. Tim became part of the rhythm of the house. He didn't fill it with noise. He filled it with presence. A silent bond formed, not with leaps and kisses, but with footsteps that followed hers, glances exchanged across rooms, the stillness of two beings who had learned the value of simply staying. The bus stop still existed. Cars still came and went. But Tim no longer looked toward them the same way. Now, when he sat at the window in the evenings, it wasn't to wait. It was to remember. And that, too, was a kind of peace. Spring arrived quietly, with soft winds and the first green leaves stretching toward the light. The town had repainted the old bus stop. A new bench had been installed, smooth and pale, and the shelter's rusted frame was replaced with clean metal and clear panels. The change was small but noticeable, like a healed scar that still remembered what hurt had once been there. Maddie took Tim on a walk that morning. Not with intention, not with a goal, just a gentle stroll through familiar streets. The leash was loose between them. He no longer pulled or paused. He walked like someone who knew the road wasn't a question anymore, but an answer. When they reached the stop, Maddie slowed. Tim stopped too, looking around. The new bench gleamed under the morning sun. The planks were bare of scratch marks, empty of stories. But Tim recognized the space. He stood still for a moment, sniffing the air, then stepped forward and sat down at the far edge of the bench, exactly where he used to curl up months ago. He didn't look down the road. He didn't search for cars. He simply sat. His ears relaxed, his body at ease, his gaze soft, distant, not searching, but remembering. There was no more waiting in him, only quiet acknowledgement, as if something had been released inside, untied from the corner of that sidewalk, as if he had finally accepted the truth not with despair, but with peace. They sat together for a while, Maddie and Tim. She didn't say anything, just placed her hand gently on his back. He didn't flinch. He didn't lean in. But he stayed. That was enough. Before they left, Maddie reached into the recess beneath the bench and pulled out the old blanket. It was damp and frayed at the edges, faded from sun and snow, but still there. She folded it slowly, carefully. Tim watched her, but didn't move. She stood, holding the blanket, and looked down at him. He rose, stretched, shook his fur lightly, then stepped beside her. His eyes didn't go back to the bench. His legs didn't hesitate. They walked home side by side, the leash slack between them, the distance no longer a gap but a thread. The sidewalk behind them held no weight now. No ghosts, just memories folded like the blanket in her arms. That day, something finished in silence, and something new without a name began.